Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar. My name is Abigail Gertis, Project Coordinator with New York State Environmental Facility Corporation Green Infrastructure and Resiliency Programs Unit. I'm joined today with my colleagues Karen Hansen, Senior Program Manager, Brian Hahn, Program Manager, and James Rooney, Project Engineer. Today's webinar will provide an overview of the 2026 Wastewater Infrastructure Engineering Planning Grant Program, whose application period is now open. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So this webinar will be recorded and the recording will be uploaded to our website after the presentation. Please note that the slides themselves will not be available for distribution. Please ensure that all questions you might have during the presentation itself are either put into the Q&A function or the chat function. We will do our best to cover any questions that are raised. However, if time does not allow us to get to every question, please feel free to email us at epg@efc.ny.gov. All right, so today's webinar again is going to be regarding the 2026 Wastewater Infrastructure Engineering Planning Grant Program. It will be an overview of this specific round. So our agenda today, we will cover a little, provide a high-level understanding of EFC. We will provide the program overview and updates for this year's round of EPG. We'll provide some information regarding the application portal and its main functions. And we will wrap up by talking about the programmatic requirements for awardees and what to expect if your application has been selected. And if time allows, again, we will do a little Q&A session. All right, and with that, I'm going to pass it off to Brian Hahn to talk about the program overview and updates.
All right, before we hit that, I'll tell you a little bit about us here at EFC. If you want to click the next slide. We really look at ourselves as New York State's water infrastructure bank. We provide multiple programs to provide water infrastructure funding, either on the clean water state revolving side, the drinking water state revolving side. We've got some state water grants and federal infrastructure funding. So we've got a mix of financings and grants to provide to communities across the state. And we've been very busy over the last few years. Since 1990, we've provided $37.1 billion worth of wastewater projects, $10.1 billion worth of drinking water, and even just since 2015, we've got $2.9 billion in water grants alone. So a lot of money and a lot of projects and progress across the state. In addition to our financing side, where we have the state revolving funds, we also run a number of grant programs. We'll tell you more about the EPG later on today, but we also have a couple grant programs that mainly focus on green infrastructure, stormwater, energy efficiency through the Green Innovation Grant Program, flood resiliency, and more green solutions through the resiliency grants. That's through the New York State Bond Act. We also have our WIA grants, which are very popular on our clean water and drinking water overall projects. We encourage municipalities to work together to try to find solutions for their water needs through intermunicipal grants. And we even fund some pump out stations and pump out boats to keep our waterways clean and clear of sewage from the Clean Vessel Assistance Program. So we touch a lot of water across New York State. So let's get down to business here. As Abigail said, the EPG program is currently open for applications. You can come through our portal for those, and let's just get into it. So our objective with the EPG program is to really build a pipeline for these wastewater treatment projects and programs to go through our Clean Water State Revolving Fund program. So this EPG is really the report for these communities to assess their needs, come up with a plan, and then come into EFC later for some funding. The highlights this year, we have $3 million in total funding available to municipalities across the state. The $50,000 awards are broken out into two categories. A brand new category this year is a preliminary inflow and infiltration study, or the PI study. This is for a high-level evaluation of your municipal sewer collection system, so you can identify some of these sources of I&I, and then come back for us later for an engineering report to really look to see what capital improvement projects you can build off of that study to start. And then the second piece is what we've had for basically since the inception of the program, and that's the wastewater infrastructure engineering report. That follows our engineering report outline that we'll talk about later. But that's your standard wastewater infrastructure report through EFC, where we look at the capital project at hand and alternatives to advance that project. Actually, just go back real quick. Just a quick note, we limit 2 active EPGs at one time per municipality, and then funding may be limited to one EPG per municipality per round. And then for our larger grant, we have $100,000 award for I&I projects, inflow and infiltration, that already have an SSES or an equivalent study. This is really to provide a larger scale evaluation of that I&I issue in your communities. So what we'll need there as well is a enforcement instrument to be eligible for the 100,000. And like we said, that SSES or an equivalent study basically to get that. But really the key indicator here is you've got that enforcement action, which would trigger it to jump up to the $100,000 award rather than the $50,000 award. And then most importantly, applications are due June 12th at 4 p.m. It's a hard deadline. Please don't wait till the last minute. Can't stress that enough. We'll probably say it a few more times in this presentation, but we really don't want you to be left out, so don't wait till the last minute. Program updates specific for this round. I touched on it briefly there. We've got these new PI studies. They're really for communities to assess that initial I&I concern or issue that's going on within your communities, and then come back to us for a larger engineering report when you can identify some capital improvement projects. We have the outline, which is on our website now. James will go over that in a little while, but just brand new for the program and for EFC. So we're really trying to help communities get an initial foothold on what's going on with your I&I and really be able to get down to a street level analysis there. And then our normal engineering reporting outline was updated in October, revised this past year. We've got the link here, but we'll also go over that in a little while. Eligibility criteria: applicants must be a municipality. The project must be a wastewater project, no drinking water projects, unfortunately. And then we do have an MHI requirement, median household income. So for upstate New York, we're talking about 90,000 or below, and then downstate, which is really the Hudson Valley south to Long Island, 110,000. And that's all based off of the 2023 American Community Survey analysis. And with that, I'll pass it over to James to talk about some eligible activities.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So when we talk about PI studies, really what they need to bring to the table is a high-level evaluation of the entirety of your sewer collection system. Oftentimes, we'll see things like RDII, rain-derived inflow and infiltration analysis. You have to use that data from whatever analysis you do to show a clear or a very likely link between rainfall and then your I&I flows or CSO or SSO events within your system. And additionally, we want to see is there any physical damage, capacity limitations, or overall degradation within your system. That kind of work can be a combination of field investigations and then also just general operator system knowledge. Lastly, something that's very important, or sorry, excuse me, not lastly, but something that's very important is a holistic mapping of the entirety of the sewer shed. What we really want to see there is what type of sewer is it? Is it a low pressure sewer? Is it a gravity fed sewer? What's the diameter of your sewer pipes? And then also, what is the material that your sewer is made out of? And what you can then go from this high level evaluation to is the additional evaluation of your system through an SSES study. So you can roll essentially this information into the basis for a future EPG, or you can do that in by prioritizing smaller areas of your sewer system. If you know, in the process of going through your I&I study, you found some hot pockets of areas that were problematic, you can then turn around and do an EPG to do further investigation there, or further evaluation that leads to rehabilitation. And so then we talk about EPG projects. This is a more broad category than just PI studies. Really the main thing to focus on here is that the study has to identify a water quality issue, evaluates alternatives that can solve that water quality issue, and then finally recommends a capital improvement project to rectify that issue. And another important part with EPG specifically, this is only for the generation of the report. Design and construction costs are not eligible. That would come along within a CWSRF financing if communities chose to go that route. And on the bottom here, you can see some project examples. Very common ones for us are inflow and infiltration, or improvements at a wastewater treatment plant that may be, you know, historically needed, things of that nature. And then ineligible activities, it's kind of just essentially the inverse of what I said earlier. If you do not identify a water quality issue that is being rectified from your project, that's not going to be eligible. If there's a drinking water project, so we don't fund drinking water rehabilitation within our EPG program. However, in the event that, let's say you had a sewer line that was degraded in the center of a street, and part of your alternative analysis was to say, we need to move this, and in doing so, you also have to replace drinking water lines in that area, that's something that would be eligible, but because it's only eligible because it is tied to your EPG issue. And I think, another important part, you cannot use an EPG to build off another engineering report that was funded by an EPG. That's an important thing to call out there. And I think that's it for this slide. And I toss this back over to Abigail, I believe.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. So funding priorities for this round, since there is a limit on the total funding amount for the EPG program, which again is $3 million. We do have funding priorities. Ultimately, EFC will evaluate and rank applications based on these priorities. So these priorities include required by an executed U.S. Environmental Protection Agency administrative order or a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation order on consent, required by a publicly notice draft or final DEC state pollutant discharge elimination system permit, or also known as a SPEDIES permit. Projects, another priority would be projects upgrading or replacing an existing wastewater system. Projects constructing a wastewater treatment and or collection system for an area with failing on-site septic systems. And the last priority would be projects that are addressing a pollutant of concern in a DEC approved plan. Some examples of those DEC approved plans include a TMDL plan, a 9-element watershed plan, or a DEC harmful algae blooms action plan, or a HABs plan. All right. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the application portal and kind of walk through some of the main functions. This is just helpful, especially if you're new to EFC's dedicated portal. So this round, similar to last round, or exactly like last year's round of EPG, our application will be hosted on EFC's dedicated application portal. The application portal itself allows applicants to save progress, print drafts, and validate responses. Detailed application instructions are available on EFC's website, specifically under the EPG program page, and through the portal itself as well. The EPG application itself includes 6 main sections. So that would be the applicant information, the general information, project information, total project budget, supporting documents, and acknowledgement. Please note that for the EPG program, a grant application certification must be signed and submitted with the application. This grant application certification must be signed by an authorized personnel of the applicant. All right. So your first step is obviously going to be to log in. This is what the EFC portal login page looks like. If you have not used EFC's portal before, you'll want to register as a new user, aka create a new account. So you can do that right here, where the arrow denotes register as a new user. If you have applied for other programs through EFC's portal, you can use that same login information for the EPG program. Great. So once you have logged in, this is what kind of the main screen looks like. You'll notice to the left of the screen, you'll see a sidebar that contains the home page, the applications page, and a help page. The applications page is kind of where you will be spending the majority of your time, because that's where you will be able to access your application itself. The home selection provides a summary of your submitted or in progress applications. So it kind of provides an overview of all the different applications you've either created or submitted to EFC for EFC's programs. And the help section includes guidance on using the portal as well as on each program application. So the help section is going to be really useful for you if you have any questions regarding application. The application instructions are going to be there. If you're looking for the grant application certification form, that will also be in that help section as well. So to create a new application, you will want to click on the new application button. So this can be found at the top of the page, again, within the applications page. So it can be found at the top or at the bottom. Once you have clicked the new application button, this dialog box will populate, and you'll want to select your municipality. You'll want to select the application type you're applying for. So in this case, it would be the Engineering Planning Grant Program, and then you'll want to hit continue. Note that just because an entity is listed in the municipality dropdown does not indicate that you are eligible for that selected application. Again, for the Engineering Planning Grant Program, municipalities are eligible. If your organization is not listed in the municipality dropdown, please submit a question on the help page to EFC requesting that your entity be added. Once the entity and the application are selected, you'll want to, again, click continue, and that will create the application itself. All right, so we've created our application. Once an application is created, it will show as a line item, again, in your applications page. One thing to note is that if you are in the help page, or if you are working on an application and you want to go back to this overview of the applications that you are working on, you can always click on that application button anywhere throughout the portal, and it'll bring you back to this page. So to open your newly created application, you'll want to select the row of your application. You'll want to ensure that it's highlighted in this pink color, and then you can click open. So we have open application right here, and that will open the application itself so that you can start inputting information for those application questions. At any point while working on your application, you are able to select the validate button down below from the applications page. This will check the application and provide a list of information that is either missing, or if there's any problems associated with your application, it will identify those. To submit an application, there must be no errors on the validation report. So you'll definitely want to periodically run these reports, and right before you submit your application, you'll also want to run this validation report to ensure that your application is good to be submitted. All right, so once in the application itself, there are many actions that you can access within the application itself. So a couple of those actions include print. So at any time you're working on your application, you are allowed to, you can print it and kind of see what your answers are looking like in any of the applicable questions. Again, you can validate it. You can validate your application within the application itself. You also have links to the application instructions, the signature page, which is that grant certification or grant application certification form, and you have access to the program summary. Note that these three links, the instructions, signature page, and the program summary, they will automatically download as a PDF file. If you would like to open them immediately in your browser, what you'll want to do is you'll want to right-click the link and you'll want to select Open in New Tab or Open in New Window after you've right-clicked the link you're looking to open. All right, so to edit an application, to input any information in any of the respective questions, you'll want to click Edit. So you cannot enter in any information unless Edit is clicked. Once you click that, all the fields within that specific tab will become editable. All right, so once you've clicked Edit, this is what the screen will look like and will allow you to enter in your information. Prior to moving to another section or tab, you must click Save to accept your revisions, or Cancel, which will delete any changes that you've made. So we have the Save button, and then we have the Cancel button. And again, to move to any of the other tabs within the application, you will need to either save or cancel the information. All right, so new to this round, we now have an application category. So you'll see in the applicant tab, the third row down, we have an application category. So one of these two items must be selected in order to proceed with the application. It's very important that you select the correct category here, as the project tab will populate specific questions based on the category you have selected. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Again, our email is epg@efc.ny.gov. All right, and once you have completed your application, you have entered in all the information, and your application is ready for submission, you'll want to go back to the main application screen to be able to submit the application itself. So you'll want to, again, select the appropriate row. So if you have multiple applications you're working on, you'll want to ensure that you have the appropriate application you're looking to submit highlighted, and it will be highlighted in that pink color. And then you will click Submit. A window, once you click Submit, a window will appear and will request that you upload the signature page, or again, the application certification form. And once that is uploaded, you can finalize the application and ultimately submit it. Again, as long as the validation error or the validation report shows no errors. All right, so those are kind of it. That's an overview of the main functions within the application portal. Again, if you have any questions, please refer to that help page that's within the portal itself, or reach out to EPG at efc.ny.gov. Just a couple of application tips. The application instructions are there for reference and can be found on either our website or within the portal itself. You'll want to ensure that whenever you're answering your responses, you're providing clear and concise responses that fully address each question, align with your project or topic, and avoid skipped questions. You'll want to, if you're submitting more than one EPG application for this round, you'll want to ensure that you're assigning a level of priority for the applications you are submitting. So if you have 2 applications and one is of a higher priority for you than per se the other, you'll want to ensure that you indicate that within the application. There is a specific question for that, so make sure that you're assigning a level of priority for the projects you are submitting. So submitting supporting documents like the permits, speedies permits, consent on order documentation, and letters of support are very helpful when we look to evaluate these applications. So we highly recommend that you submit all the supporting documents that, that you have for the project. Guidance for supporting documents can be found also on the help page and on our website. Another thing is you can document public engagement efforts. This sometimes helps applications it helps the application evaluation. So if you have public engagement documentation, please provide that. And then you'll want to ensure that the grant application certification is signed by an authorized member of the municipality applying. So if you have a grant consultant that's working on the application on your behalf, you'll want to ensure that the grant consultant is not the one signing the grant application certification. It has to be signed by an authorized member of the municipality that is applying. All right, and last but not least, and most importantly, submit early. Whenever you submit early, this allows sufficient time to address any issues with incomplete submissions or maybe incorrect submissions. So we strongly encourage you to submit early. Feel free to submit a week early, a couple of days early. Just ensure you're not submitting right at that 4 o'clock deadline. All right, and with that, I'm going to pass it back off to Brian Hahn to talk about program requirements if your application is selected.
Yeah, so if you're fortunate enough to be selected for an award, this is just a little idea of what's to come after that award. So we have the document submission requirements. So next step after we send you that award letter is to get some documents here and enter into a grant agreement. So we'll need a few board resolutions, one that establishes the authorized representative that can sign the agreement and disbursement requests later on, and then the local match, which we'll have a slide on in a little bit. We'll need an executed engineering agreement with the firm that you choose, an architectural and engineering certification, which we'll get into in a little bit, and then a budget and plan of finance form. So first off, local match. This program is an 80% grant, 20% local match setup. So pretty simple math on these. If you receive a $50,000 award, the local match is a minimum of $10,000 for a total project cost. Typically, we see around $60,000. If there is more, say the agreement's for 70, we just would have to see that local match at 20,000 there. But it's just basically that 80-20 line is what we see. And then similar on the $100,000 grant, it's a $20,000 local match. And as a note on the side here, you could have your engineering agreement could be for that 60,000. It may be for 50,000. You are eligible to use your technical or admin forces to make up for some of that other match on your side. So if you have some investigative work or something that your local forces can do, that could be eligible as well for match. And that goes along with that in-kind services line there. So I mentioned A&E procurement a little earlier. That is a requirement that you must proceed to do to comply with the program. It's really in accordance with 40 USC 1101. Basically, it's designed to help the municipality. A lot of times municipalities just work with one engineer, they get comfortable with them, that's fine. But also this is really to encourage you to make sure you know what's out there, see what other firms provide the same type of services, and make sure that you're paying an adequate rate and not getting ripped off by any one engineering firm. So it's really to protect the municipality and make sure that you just know what's going on out there. It's not a low bid requirement. You can still select the engineer you want, but it's really an evaluation system to make sure that you know what's out there and you're not just going in this blindly. And then our grant terms. So once you're awarded, and after document submission process is complete, EFC will enter into a grant agreement with the awardees. The grant agreements are typically executed within 6 months of the award. We like to move quick. We like to get these projects going, get these reports in-house and try to find you some funding to go with that capital project. The grant term of the agreement is typically 2 to 3 years, depending on the grant type. The $50,000 grants are a 2-year term. The $100,000 grants are a 3-year term. Along with those grants on the 50,000 or less, we're really looking at you to send us a draft agreement or a draft engineering report or PI study within that first year, so our staff can begin to review it. There's usually a round of comments, so it doesn't, it's not an immediate acceptance on our end. There's usually a little bit of back and forth. And additionally, it's a 1.5 years for those I&I larger type of projects. Approvable engineering reports must be submitted electronically to EFC, like we said, no later than 6 months prior to the grant agreement expiration, so that we have adequate time to review, coordinate our comments, and close out, which is also includes disbursement. Speaking of disbursement, typically you'll see project or programs or reimbursement type disbursements. We're a little different here. It's a report. We know you're working on it. We want to give you a little seed money up front. So once you execute that grant agreement with EFC, we'll send you 25% of the grant award to get the project started. You progress the project, you get your draft report, you submit that to EFC. We'll review it against our outlines, and as long as it matches up with our outlines, we'll release that second 25%. Typically, there's comments that go on in between that initial draft review and where we find acceptance. So after a few rounds of comments or whatnot, EFC will find that report acceptable, and then we'll release that final 50%. At that point, all invoices and cost documentation must be submitted to EFC, and we'll work with you on that to make sure everything's submitted and you can maximize your grant.
All right, so when we talk about the report to be submitted for PI studies, and then in the next slide we'll talk about EPG studies, there's a bare minimum of what we need to see to have the report be deemed acceptable in our eyes. So quickly, we'll talk about the cover page. On the cover page, we want to have a descriptive project title. And then usually they'll be on the letterhead, or it'll be affixed with the name of the engineering firm that was doing the work. Definitely want to see the EFC grant ID. So whenever you are awarded a PI grant or an EPG grant, there'll be a number associated with that. Want to see that on the cover of the report as well. And then most importantly, well, second most importantly, the reports need to be dated so we can keep track of the revisions that come in and out. And then most importantly, you need the stamp of the professional engineer who's responsible for the report. Oftentimes we'll see some consulting firms will use a corporate seal rather than the PE stamp. If we receive that, we won't look at the report until we have the appropriate stamp on there. It's just a part of business here. Going to the executive summary, Again, that's gonna be your high level description of the study that you did, why you needed to do it, what evaluation specifically you guys did during your study, and then what's the schedule cost and next steps for evaluating using that information to then go forward to an EPG or a CWSRF project to remediate your water quality issue. Next, you want to, again, I guess the definition of the problem is just restating part of your executive summary where you say, this is the water quality issue that we're trying to solve. Then you go into your project background and history. With this, we definitely want to see a really good description and probably a map of the entirety of your sewer shed and identifying the ownership of all the sewers in this, identify ownership of all sewers in the sewer shed, it's a hard one, including any outside users. So that means we need to define the extent of sewers owned by the municipality and any other municipalities or outside users that are part of the sewer shed. So if you have folks who maybe are not part of your municipality but are sending sewer to your wastewater treatment plant, we need to know about stuff like that. Then we talk about the condition of your existing sewer system. That's going to be your as-built sewer maps that I talked about earlier today. Any of your discharge monitoring reports from your wastewater treatment plant, lift station flow reports, things of that nature. Then last one is our sewer system evaluation. So then that's where we want to see folks go into their analysis that they conducted to create the correlation between rainfall data and CSO activations or SSO activations, or increased flows at the wastewater treatment plant beyond what your system should be producing. That's where we want to see all that information and a really good holistic analysis of the data you collected in this report. Then for summary and next steps, that's where you tie it all together. Say, hey, this is where we think we may have I&I. This is where we'd like to go forward in the future to address this I&I, be that through an EPG report or a CWSRF. Just go straight to that. Next slide. And so when we talk about the EPG report, so this is only slightly different from the PI reports. This is a bit more broad, but it's essentially the same information. On the cover, we're going to need the same exact information. The only difference will be that instead of the PI grant number, it's going to be your EPG grant number. Your executive summary is going to be essentially the same. What is the water quality issue that you've been trying to solve? How did you attempt to solve it, or how would you like to solve it rather? And then you go through your the alternatives you analyzed, the alternative you're going to recommend, how much it's going to cost, and how long approximately you think it's going to take it. Then with the definition of the problem, very similar to our last slide, just a brief overview of the problem you're trying to solve. Then with project background and history, that's where we would like to see, hey, is there, what has happened in the past to lead you to this point? Is there historical problems with I&I? Is there, if you're at a wastewater treatment plant or a pump station, is there historical problems with backups? Things of that nature. And there's just in the interest of time, there's a much more detailed engineering report outline. If you can see on the link below here, I would encourage everybody, if you are granted an EPG, to seek that information. One quick thing here as well. When we talk about alternatives analysis and recommend an alternative, we definitely want to see folks have a holistic alternatives analysis. Oftentimes we'll see some municipalities who they hire a consulting engineer. They say, hey, this is our problem. This is how we would like to fix it because we're comfortable with this technology, or this is how our neighbors to the east, west, or north did it in the past, and we think that'll work for us. And then the consulting engineer comes to us with a essentially saying, this is what we're going to do, without really fleshing out how much, like, why do you want to do that? What other ways could you do it? Is this the best engineering practice to go about in this manner? We definitely want to see a best engineering practice, show us a couple different alternatives, or show that you thought about different options rather than the one that may be the best alternative, but we need to see some variety, if you will. And then lastly, yeah, show us your recommended alternative, how much you think it's gonna cost, the anticipated schedule for submitting a CWSRF application if you want to go down that route, or, if you do go down that route, then we'd want to see what's your schedule for bidding, plans and specs submission, things of that nature. And then with your maps and figures, you need to see a project location map. That's actually one of the bare minimum requirements to even get the report in the door. And then any applicable figures, maps of your sewer system, maps of your wastewater treatment collection system, wastewater treatment plant, things of that nature. So again, I would direct folks to use the links provided in this, and then I know we're going to provide them in the chat after we wrap up our presentation, but there's a lot more examples of things to be aware of in those documents, so thank you.
All right, and again, those last slides kind of covering the programmatic requirements if your application is awarded. So just want to kind of summarize everything. This year's EPG program is open. Applications are due June 12th at 4 p.m. Wanted to kind of highlight some important reference documents that are at your disposal and that we highly recommend you checking out as you're navigating the application process. All of these documents can be found on EFC's website under the Wastewater Infrastructure Engineering Planning Grants Program. It can also be, the majority of these documents can also be found on the application portal itself, again, within that help page. That help page is really going to be a good resource for you as you're navigating the application process. So a couple of the documents to highlight. So the 2023 American Community Survey data, again, this is kind of where that MHI requirement ties into. So if you're interested in understanding whether or not your community is eligible under the EPG program, we recommend you checking out that document. You're also welcome to, if you have, an interesting kind of project dynamic, you're welcome to reach out to us for guidance on MHI requirements. The next one is the program summary. So almost everything we had covered, if not everything in more detail that we covered today on today's webinar is in the program summary. So we highly recommend if you have any further questions or if you can't quite remember something that was mentioned during the webinar, highly recommend you referencing the program summary. The application instructions, I know I harped on this kind of in the application portal section of the webinar. However, they are there. They do go kind of question by question and provide guidance. So we highly recommend you referring to that document as you're answering those questions within the application. There's also an application document guidance as well. This will walk you through some of the required and suggested or recommended documents that you'll want to submit with your application. And then as James just touched upon, we have the engineering report outline for wastewater infrastructure upgrades or wastewater infrastructure reports. And then we also have the preliminary I&I, so inflow and infiltration study outline. And again, all of this is available at our website. It's www.efc.ny.gov/EPG. You'll see the photo on the right-hand side. Those are what those application or those document links look like within the website itself. And if you have any questions after referencing these documents, of course, feel free to reach out to epg@efc.ny.gov. All right, and with that, that is our webinar for today. I'll take a moment to let folks enter in any questions they might have in the chat. So we'll pause for a moment, kind of evaluate some of the, or look at some of the questions we currently have, and then also allow people to enter in any remaining questions. And again, if we can't get to your questions today, especially project-specific questions, we really recommend reaching out to us via email so we can set up some time to talk about your project in more detail. All right, so one of the questions we had is, please clarify if CERP is required for all EFC grant programs. If CERP So are there any cases where seeker is sufficient, or should all EFC grant projects advance with SERP?
So we do a blanket seeker SERP waiver basically for these, basically because they're reports. There's no ground moving, there's no environmental, I guess, work at this point. If the project were to progress to a Clean Water State Revolving Fund financing or a grant award through EFC, then yes, we would require seeker and SERP at that point.
All right, so we have a question. So is there no longer funding for smoke testing, CCTV investigation, unless a community has a high level system-wide PI study in place?
Well, I will say this as I'm not 100% sure, but I believe you do not need to start with a PI study. You can elect to start with a PI study. So I guess maybe a good way to view the PI study is an additional opportunity to have investigatory work done for you prior to going towards an EPG or a CWSRF project. So, you could have smoke testing and things like that nature done in a PI study, or you could have it done in an EPG. But to answer the question, you wouldn't be denied EPG funding unless if you hadn't done a PI study.
All right, and if you have any further questions regarding that, again, feel free to email us. The email is epg@efc.ny.gov. All right. So another question we had are what kind of upgrades to treatment plants are considered eligible under the EPG program?
Can you say it again?
Yeah, so what kind of upgrades to treatment plants are considered eligible?
Equipment.
Anything that's directly related to the treatment chain is certainly eligible. And then there's oftentimes we'll see, like for instance, we're working on a project right now where a portion of the headworks building is not in compliance with the federal guidance on flood protection. So they're within a flood zone and they know that their final finished grade of that building needs to be raised. So that is an eligible activity. It has to just be associated with a capital improvement project that is directly improving water quality.
All right, so another question, is the June 12th deadline for both EPGs and PI studies? Yes, the June 12th deadline is for the entirety of the wastewater infrastructure engineering program. So that June 12th at 4 p.m. is applicable for all eligible activities and applications under the EPG program.
And actually, I think I want to issue a clarification about the smoke testing. I'd have to get back to you on the eligibility of use of smoke testing in a PI study. I don't know just yet, since this is a new program for us and we haven't had any come in the door yet, if that's something that we would consider eligible for a holistic system investigation unless you did smoke testing for the entirety of the system. So there may be a caveat there. So I apologize, can't give you 100% answer there. Yes, but please submit an email to the emails provided and we'd be happy to get you a more holistic answer.
And I do see a question about this year's priorities. Again, our program summary has all of the information that we covered in today's webinar in greater detail. So I highly recommend you checking out the program summary. If you have any further questions after looking at that, feel free to shoot us an email and we would be happy to assist you and provide any guidance that we can. All right, and I think with that, we are wrapped up for time. I know that there are some remaining questions. Again, feel free to email us. I'll also take note of some of these questions that are in the chat and kind of have your perspective or have an EFC engineer reach out to you regarding those very project specific questions. We are always here to support the municipalities in the application process and in the project process as well. We're happy to meet with you, discuss projects at a high level, and discuss any application requirements or any application questions you might have. All right, so last but not least, thank you everyone for your time today. We really appreciate your interest in the engineering planning grant program.